Greetings, Marsh here, and welcome to episode 377 of my modded Factorio playthrough. In this episode, we are going to upgrade our pink science setup. Enjoy. Alright, we're looking pretty good here. It looks like the blue science has now caught up. All three sciences have fully populated our labs here. So now it's time for more of them. Then we need to figure out where it'll fit. Well, it technically fits there, but there's a road. Well, the most linear place to put it would probably be out here. We'll have to clear some stuff out there, but then, of course, this should fit. And the robot zone still covers it. So there we go. The robots immediately are filling up the labs. So we're going to need to get these belts through here. Maybe up there. Of course, now all the science packs are getting used up again. I did place even more reactors down. So, of course, we're waiting on all those turbines to be placed. Once it is, we'll have even more power. And interesting to note is that we have gone through most of all of that plutonium that we originally generated when we set up this thing. So now it's going to get to below 100, and then it will pulse just to keep enough plutonium on hand for whatever we need. In a similar way that the reactors are running to keep about 100 curium on hand. And a lot of these fuel components are definitely working hard, and wow, that belt is not the right way. But we haven't maxed out our fuel setup yet, and of course, a lot of these could get higher tier modules or even productivity modules, which I'm choosing not to use here. So we still have some room for expansion. Probably the biggest hurdle is just having enough reactors, and every single one of these reactors is thorium, which is 224 thorium reactors. And our science is now being consumed again. Well, if the belts were the right way. Yeah, just about 50 gigawatts or so. That seems to be what we are settling on right now. And no more rocket launches. The reason is that we only have so many slots for whitelist items. So as a result, we won't be launching any more rockets until we clear some of these out. Or we can do multiple chests here. The logic signal still works. We just need to not request everything into one chest to have each chest at a maximum of 5 items. But the problem you can run in there, if multiple inserters get swing conditions, they will all swing and then the item will be stuck hanging over here. So let's say it swings with an item you need, like a protection field, and then that protection field is installed by this rocket, then that one is just kind of hovering and the inserter will be holding onto it as well, and it won't be able to do anything else. And it's actually not that big a deal here. And since we're here, this is the perfect opportunity to use some Nixie tubes. And I'm not sure if we have to have them in a row to get all of the digits placed. Let's see. It would be nice if we can space them out. Of course, this is the one type of Nixie tube that I'm not making right now. I am kind of covering up the various messages, but I'm running out of screen real estate to put all this stuff. So we can shrink it down if we really need to read it, but really it's not the case. The main thing I want to see is what the actual request was. And it says we have no copper, which is interesting, but it potentially could be upgraded if we need more, and well, bam, there we go. Research is complete on Faster Than Light Theory 3. So let's see, if I connect this across all of these, is it going to work properly? Because we want to see what the space science number is. Unfortunately, doesn't look like it. But we can connect them all like that. And how about we use some hazard concrete here to mark where the digits are. So we're at about 215,000 of our space science. And actually, we need a lot less space science than I was originally planning on, because the final goal for this last research is 2 million packs. However, what I didn't take into account was the fact that we have a productivity bonus of 80% on our labs. So it means we only really need about 1 million science as opposed to 2. So we're up to 20% here. However, I would still like to boost this number up, because that would suck to be waiting for rockets. Having all this infrastructure and just these rockets sitting here and nothing happening seems weird. And suddenly power demand is way lower now that we're not doing all that science anymore. Well, one thing we can do is have the satellites actually be placed in a different chest because they're really the only one that's going to be treated differently. So the satellite, we don't care about the status of the network, so we can just do a requester chest for it. Asking for one, we'll remove the request from the other one. It's still going to get the satellite priority from this poll, and note that there are 2 less items on it now. We no longer need the assembly components or the structural components, so it's going down the list. So the condition for this next one, of course it's going to swing when we do it, so maybe we should take that request off, is actually quite simple. Is this chest empty? Are there no components waiting to be placed in the rocket? So everything is equal to 0. If so, it can swing. To make sure this works, we'll have to make sure no extra components are stuck in any of these. It seems like it worked for most of them. A couple of those dry dock components made it in there, but that's probably just because we made them so fast, so I imagine most of these will be made at a slow enough rate where we actually won't have any extras. Okay, well, it should be ready to go here. So let's plop it in there. The satellite is removed from that request, but we also have to remove it from the chest. And there it goes. So let's come through here, change all this out, and remove the extra satellites. Of course, we're going to see a lot of launches now. Satellites we don't need. There we go. And I guess we could have kind of fixed this by removing some of these items from this list, the ones that we weren't actively working on, but I'd rather have something that'll just work without us messing with it. So we definitely need to make sure these extra items are no longer making it into the chest. I suppose we could use the circuit network to actually change these logistics requests, but what we have now seems to basically be working, so we can just keep an eye on it. Meanwhile, we don't need these parts anymore, which are getting instantly processed back to their components. So ideally, we'd really only see like 1 item in these buffer chests at any given time. But it's moving. Our science is building. Okay, well, now we need to figure out what we want to do. Our next goal here is the faster than light theory D. The numbers are now the same as they were for the previous research, but it includes pink science. But also, we need spaceship parts because right now, we're not building any, and some of them potentially could take a very long time to make. Such as the protection fields, which one of them would require 100 energy shield 6s. And the problem there is that those energy shields, as you see by the ingredients that go into it, can be exceptionally expensive. Especially because they require biter orbs. We're limited on the amount of biter orbs we get simply based on how often they attack, unless we decide to make more of them, which we're not actually doing. At least we're not making them from scratch. We're making them from themselves. But it is possible to make them from scratch, so if we need that, then that's what we'll have to do. But it doesn't make much sense to start on faster than light theory D, because our limiting factor is going to be the current setup that makes the pink science. So all of our expansions to these other packs will not matter until we upgrade pink as well. And actually the effect of it is going to be a lot less because we only need half as much pink science as the rest of it. And I believe our factory is around 14 items a second right now. So it's actually almost half of what our requirement would be for the rest of this stuff to fire up. But that said, we are not launching any spaceship parts. So we really ought to work on that first. And although doing something like these protection fields would be ideal to start on, the research requirement is also huge. Whereas for things like the thrusters and the casings, they are quite small. And strangely enough, the thrusters are cheaper than the hull components, but We'll go with it. It's 18,000, which really isn't that much compared to what we're doing now, but this hasn't been upgraded yet, so it's probably going to be kind of slow. But we need to build some spaceship thrusters, which are honestly fairly easy. It's just a bunch of stuff, and we already manufacture a lot of these items rather aggressively. The limiting factor here might be speed module 8s, because I think we probably only do about 1 a second of those. But still, that's one of these pretty much a minute, and if we're launching rockets at 2 a minute, you know, that's fine. So we'll need some spaceship thrusters, and then they call it space casings, which is interesting because it's just hull components. And we'll need a titanium and low density structure. So we'll do that for now. And both of those are components we need a ton of, so it's good that we get those started as quickly as possible. So research is going to be a little slow here. And I suppose at this point we're not even really using this at all for any kind of actual research, so I suppose we should pull it all out because that's more labs. And science packs too, that can then get inserted into the working part of the setup. And we need 37.5, so we'll just do a new line. And smacked full of productivities as always. 1/2 gets the combined memory cells. More weird train issues, which I still haven't been able to figure out. It might just be a lag thing, because this thing is a counter and it's counting very precisely. So if it hiccups and the count is wrong, then the train's sitting there because it's missing an item. And because it's too low on items, it makes me think that items made it through this counter without actually being counted. And this might be a modded Factorio problem, where maybe with standard belts that only go up to 45 items a second, that it's not an issue, but then when you do something like 60 items like this, with only one counter, that perhaps it's an issue. Like maybe if there were 2 belts worth of counters, it would be better. So first thing we do here is break these items down to their base resource, and a lot of these can use productivities, so we do that, and I'm already quite happy about what's happening here because this is turning into a 1-to-1 ratio for most things, even the silicon wafers. The only thing we'll need a few of are the integrated electronics machines, and because they have so many inputs, it probably won't be practical to do direct insertion for that. But that part looks good. And then on the other side, we would need to do the cargo kits, and technically, wow, we can get it down to 1 machine, so this setup might be a lot smaller than the other ones. Well, it needs an input on one side, which requires all of this, and we certainly can get it down to 1 machine. Perhaps the question here will just be the actual logistics of getting all these items in, because we would need some plate choppers for aluminum, and we're going to need several. But the good thing is that all of these numbers are within what 1 belt can do. So we really don't need to do any sort of direct insertion or anything. It'll just kind of work. And the rest of these items would come in on the bus. So it's actually going to be relatively small, at least the supporting components. The main area is still going to be kind of large, but because this is only needed at half of the rate as those other items, it's going to be a lot easier. So we'll put the final frame machine in the middle, and then have 1 supporting component up here, and I suppose that's a decent enough spot for a substation. Research is done on our next spaceship component. So the new one we got is the spaceship thrusters, of which we need 100 of them. And before we begin, we kind of want to check to see, is that in this whitelist, to see if we need to mess with anything. And luckily we don't. Spaceship thruster and hull components are part of this whitelist, which means we can just not mess with it, and it will work. So we need to do another component, and it's going to be very similar to what we've done before here. I'm always amazed at how many requests we're getting these days, just because the factory is so busy. So we'll switch over to the thruster. So we got our SpaceX Combinator now. The thing we want to pull out is the thruster. Then we're checking for available thrusters on our network. Since we still need some, it's getting the green. And then we need to make a request. And right off the bat, we need to take a look at this because a lot of these numbers are really big. Really, it's the low density structure which is the problem. That said, we did upgrade to these bigger chests. I haven't started building them yet, but how about let's just plop one in there. So now we have 80 slots, and all of these items will now fit. So it's good that we're starting this now because it's going to be a relatively slow process. All these space parts basically are. That's why we need to have the automated system to choose which ones to put on the rocket just based on which ones are available. And it gets picked up. Oh wow, that timing was perfect. Let's make sure that this logic works. Nope. It tried to swing both of them. And I guess it did that right when this chest became empty. This problem would probably fix itself because then when the next rocket is completed, this inserter will be here. It does kind of create the problem that the next inserter will swing over and get stuck. Oh, we definitely don't need this here anymore. Well, one thing we can do is, instead of looking at just the contents of the chest, we can look at the status of the inserter as well. So how about we do read hand contents and do hold. So this requires that no item is in either of these. We'll see if that works. It will kind of temporarily mess up the priority order, but I think that's fine. Okay, well, we'll just have to let it go and then check later. If we look at our progress here, we now have 2 of the thrusters in space. No circuits again, but that's not the train being clogged. It's just it needs a lot of circuits. Yeah, everything seems to be working fine. It's just very busy. Plutonium is getting quite low now. I would like to see this actually in operation. Let's see, if it just makes a few more bot requests here, we'll see this thing just barely inch forward. Oh, there it goes. This setup is incredibly powerful, so it takes very little work for it to keep us topped up, but now it is. So we have finally gotten our nuclear trio in balance, where everything is running on its own as it relates to each other, keeping fuel available for all setups. Fantastic. Uh-oh. One of the reactors is overheated. Well, the one that's actually running is plutonium, so is that the problem? Oh yeah. That's just because curium is too low. And I suppose that makes sense. We are in a period of low power demand, so the demand was not there to clear up all of these reactors, because they turn on when the curium is required. Well, we might be able to adjust this behavior, because we don't have to drop it to 0, we just need to change its priority in the system. So if we do something like -50 and it normally turns on at 15, that means it would turn on at 65. So let's try that. And good news, it looks like all of our reactors were finally placed. That could be contributing to why we have so much power on hand now. How have the launches been going? Doing alright, we have 20 thrusters now. And I suppose we can just go over there and see what's going on. 294,000 science packs. And construction is happening here. It seems like it's just short on the modules, and that makes sense. We can only make them so fast. We decided very early on in the factory to have a limit of around 1 a second, so that's about as fast as they're going to be coming out of this. So luckily, making science in this way is similar to pretty much every other setup, in that it's just a long line of machines that only have 2 inputs. And I believe that was different prior to the Science Cost Tweaker updates, where Blue Science in particular required a bunch of stuff, and now they have been unified to be a lot more similar to each other, which is awesome. So, one string of this would be 48, then 96, and then 144, which is too much, so we'll want to pull it back to get our required number of machines, and it would go somewhere, but we'll just plop it there. And we're running out of space, so at this point we need to kind of make a decision. Do we keep going down here or start using space above? Well, this setup is one of the more narrow ones, and I suppose if that's the case, that it fits well here because it doesn't block this stuff. Or we could try to use some of the space here, but compared to what we need, that's really not enough, so I suppose we'll just kind of use this. The roads are getting very square and exact now. And we really don't need rocks or trees in any of this area, because we're pretty much going to use all of it. Oh no, it can't be rotated. Well, since the belt is going that direction, let's use this, because we can move it. And we'll give this a nice, safe 2 spaces. And taking a look at all of these inserters, we're checking to see if any of them are stuck holding an item over the silo, and they don't seem to be. So hopefully that fix means that we won't have to deal with that anymore. Some of the modules are weird on these. Although clearing out the pollution is important, we want every one of these to have productivity, because it's that important. Is that a flaw that all of these have? Looks like it. Well, maybe I finally figured out why the productivity rate of this was not 75, but strangely slightly slower sometimes. And a couple of you were probably screaming at the screen about what that problem was. But I think I found it now. It's really not that many of the machines. And is that one fine? Nope. Wow. That explains why the problem existed on every single setup, because it started from red signs. Well, checking the numbers even without all of the modules, it's now above 75, so clearly that is fixed. Okay, I think I've got everything piped in here, so it's time to see how our pink science works. So first, the cobalt, making the gears, and also the white circuits kind of do a little bit of a loop there. So now the aluminum and titanium. This build is very snaky. And I guess we'll come over on this side then. Silicon and tinned copper wire. It might look slightly better if that one was pointed inwards, even though it doesn't matter. Of course, this takes a very long time to get started. But there we go. Shoot in the plastic. And then the solder and gold wire. Sure, that seems good. So the final bit is the brass and green circuits. It seems like it's using 100% of the brass there, so let's make sure there's not a limitation. And there isn't, it only needs 11. So it's just filling up a buffer. So there we go. That's everything we need for the pink science upgrade. Now with the correct amount of productivity modules, we will get the expected performance. Alright, looking good. Now we need to figure out where we're going to put the science, because we keep running out of bus slots. Well, we might be able to figure that out by removing the old setup here, and maybe we would clear out a belt line that we can use. And there we go. It looks like we have, because we now have aluminum. That is an orphaned belt, which means we gained ourselves another slot. And that's kind of what we've been doing with this whole thing, is as we've been upgrading to coils, we've been doing it by putting the coils on first, and then after the plates have been replaced, removing the plate belt, which then gives us an extra belt for something else, which is why it's looking increasingly disorganized. Well, we have another warehouse we need to empty, so we'll just do that and get rid of the request. But we now have another slot, and at this point I think balancing is a lot less important because we're not getting a full belt of output out of this, so we'll just shoot it in normally, and hopefully all these fluids hold up. They have been holding up for the other science packs so far. And it's interesting that our butane burner is basically close to maxing out on the gas, which is interesting. Wouldn't really expect that, but that's probably just because it's a byproduct of science, specifically the blue science. So we might have to start making plastic from butane just so we don't have that risk anymore. And that seems like a reasonable next endeavor. Because our pink science has made it here, now researching these space casings is no longer wise because we have not supercharged the purple research yet. So we would be wasting our pink upgrades if we continued to research this. So instead, we'll dump it into what we can do at supercharged speeds, and that's the faster than light theory D. And then we'll throw the space casings in after that. So now that this is hooked up, all the labs will get supplied, and then if this pink ever gets backed up like the rest of these, then we'll know that we have reached the maximum of our labs. We do have 3 setups now, and each one is 23.66, so all 3 of them combined will be mighty close to 75 a second. Because of natural hiccups in production, we may never actually need any extra labs. That could potentially be enough right there. Research is continuing and the gigawatts are going back up. So I suppose that means all is well there. And we could work on the purple science, which is certainly something that we need to do. But the most immediate issue that our factory has is probably our plastic setup and the fact that it can barely keep up with burning butane. But fixing that is going to have to wait until the next episode. Thanks for watching, and I will see you later.